The obsidian walls of the Velthran observation deck stretched endlessly, smooth as liquid night. Dr. Nora Winters pressed her palm against the cool surface, watching Earth shrink to a pale blue marble in the viewport. 3 months. That's how long she'd been aboard the Continuum, the massive alien vessel that had become humanity's bridge to the stars. Your biometric readings indicate elevated stress hormones, said a melodic voice behind her. Nora turned to find Kixvan, her assigned observer, hovering in the doorway. The Velthran's form shimmered like heat waves over summer pavement, vaguely humanoid but composed of something that existed between energy and matter. This is the 14th time this cycle you have visited this location. Nora managed a weak smile. I miss home. Inefficient, Kixvan stated without malice. Their species had long ago eliminated what they called attachment disorders. To the Velthran, emotions were evolutionary remnants, useful once but now obsolete. The teleportation arrays can transport you to Earth in 0.03 seconds. Why experience longing when resolution is instantaneous? Because James won't use them, Nora thought but didn't say. Her partner had always been terrified of teleportation, convinced that the person who materialized on the other side wouldn't really be him, just a copy with his memories. She'd spent countless nights trying to explain the science, showing him the quantum data that proved consciousness remained continuous. He'd listened, held her hand and said, I believe you understand the science, Nora, but I don't think science understands me. The communication panel on her wrist vibrated. Nora's heart lurched. James never called during her research hours unless something was wrong. She activated the hologram, and his face materialized before her, thinner than she remembered, with shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there 3 months ago. Hey, Stargazer, he said, his voice carrying that familiar warmth that made her chest ache. Don't panic, but I need to tell you something. The next words shattered her world into fragments. Cascading neural degradation. Rare. Aggressive. 6 months, maybe 8 if the treatments worked. The doctors had caught it late because the symptoms mimicked stress, exhaustion, the normal wear of life. I'm coming home, Nora said immediately. I'm leaving tonight. Nora, no. This opportunity is nothing compared to you. Her voice cracked. Nothing, James. Do you understand? I'll request immediate teleportation to the nearest. I don't want you to teleport. His interruption was gentle but firm. If you're coming home, come home the real way, on a ship. I want to know you're actually traveling through space, that every second you're getting closer to me, not just blinking out of existence and reappearing. Please. Kixvan observed this exchange with what might have been confusion in a being capable of such things. When Nora ended the call, tears streaming down her face, the alien asked, You will abandon 17 years of work, a position that 3 billion humans competed for, to return via conventional propulsion? The journey requires 21 days. Yes. Your partner will deteriorate further in that time. Teleportation offers instantaneous reunion. He asked me not to. Therefore, you will sacrifice efficiency, career advancement, and precious time together to honor an irrational fear. Kixvan's form pulsed with something resembling agitation. This is the behavior we were sent to study. Human illogic. Explain. Nora wiped her eyes and looked directly at the shimmering alien. Because those 21 days, every single second I spend traveling through real space, thinking about him, moving toward him, that's not wasted time. That's love made visible. He'll know I'm coming. He'll feel me getting closer. And when I finally walk through that door, when I hold him, it won't be some quantum copy of me. It'll be me, exactly who crossed the stars for him. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. You can't understand that, can you? No, Kixvan admitted. But I am assigned to try. Within hours. Nora had resigned from the exchange program and booked passage on the Meridian Runner, an old cargo hauler that still made conventional runs to Earth. The Velthran Council was baffled. Kixvan submitted a preliminary report describing the decision as catastrophically irrational and requested permission to follow and observe. Permission was granted. After all, understanding human dysfunction was precisely why they were there. What Kixvan didn't mention in the report was the strange sensation that had emerged during Nora's explanation, an uncomfortable flutter in the quantum field that comprised their consciousness. Something that felt almost like curiosity, or perhaps something even more dangerous. The Meridian Runner was everything the Velthran vessel was not. Where the Continuum had been sleek and silent, the runner groaned and shuddered with every course correction. Its hull was scarred from decades of micrometeor impacts, and the recycled air tasted faintly of metal and old coffee. Nora loved it immediately. "Cabin 12 is yours," said Captain Dmitry Volkov, a weathered man with kind eyes and salt and pepper beard. "We're carrying medical supplies to Luna Station, then straight shot to Earth. 3 weeks, maybe less if the solar winds cooperate." He studied her face. "You running from something or toward something?" "Toward," Nora said softly. "Then you picked the right ship. We take our time getting where we're going." Kixman had manifested in the cargo bay, invisible to the human crew but present, observing. The alien had never been confined to such a small space for such an extended duration. No teleportation arrays, no quantum gates, just primitive fusion engines pushing metal through the void at a pace that seemed almost deliberately slow. Nora spent the first 3 days in her cabin, composing messages to James. Not quick texts, but long, rambling letters about everything and nothing. She told him about the stars outside her window, how different they looked when you were actually moving past them instead of blinking between points. She described the sound of the engines, the way the ship vibrated during mealtimes when everyone gathered in the common area. "I'm day 3 closer to you," she wrote. 18 more to go. "I can feel the distance shrinking." Kixman read every message, analyzing the content for logical patterns. There were none. Nora described irrelevant details, the pattern of rust on the bathroom mirror, the way condensation formed on the viewport at night, how another passenger hummed old Earth songs while working in the hydroponic bay. Nothing of scientific value, nothing that brought her physically closer to her destination any faster. Yet her stress hormones had decreased significantly. On the 5th day, Nora discovered that Victor Chen, the ship's engineer, was growing tomatoes in the hydroponics section. Real tomatoes, not the synthesized nutrients common on modern vessels. "Takes longer," Victor explained, "but they taste like something actually grew them, you know." Nora found herself spending hours there, helping tend the plants. The work was meditative, purposeful. Kixman watched as she carefully trimmed leaves and adjusted water levels, her hands steady, despite the grief that still shadowed her eyes. "This serves no function toward your goal," Kixman finally spoke, making himself visible. Victor yelped and dropped his watering can. Nora just smiled sadly. "Victor, meet Kixman. He's a Velthran observer. He's been following me since I left the Continuum." "Bloody hell," Victor muttered. "Could have introduced yourself normally." "I am attempting to understand human behavior under emotional duress," Kixman explained. "Specifically, why Dr. Winters engages in agricultural labor when time with her dying partner is finite. The bluntness would have offended most species." Victor just snorted. "Because sitting alone in a cabin for 3 weeks thinking about death would drive her mad. Work helps. Growing things helps. Making the journey mean something helps." He looked at Nora. "Your partner, he know you're doing this?" "I send him pictures of the tomatoes," Nora said. "He loves that I'm learning to garden. Says when I get home we'll plant a real garden together. Even if—" She didn't finish. "Even if he doesn't live to see it grow," Victor finished gently. "But you'll have done it with him anyway. Time together, even apart." Kixman's form flickered. The logic still eluded them, but something about the exchange created that uncomfortable sensation again, stronger now. At night, Nora would stand at the viewport and talk to Kixman. She'd started to appreciate the alien's presence, the honest confusion that had no judgment in it. She told them about James, how they'd met at a conference on marine biology, how he'd stood in the rain for 40 minutes to get her favorite dumplings when she was sick, how he'd proposed underwater during a dive in the Maldives. "He said yes, surrounded by fish?" Kixman asked. "I said yes," Nora corrected, laughing through tears. He asked, "And this memory provides you comfort despite causing visible distress?" "Yes." Paradoxical. Human. By day 12, Kixman had begun experiencing something unprecedented. When Nora received a video message from James, his face thinner but smiling as he showed her the garden plot he'd prepared in their yard, Kixman felt their quantum field resonate in a way it never had. The sensation was almost painful, a longing for something they couldn't name. "I miss you," James said in the video. 9 more days. I'm counting everyone. Nora touched the hologram, her fingers passing through his face. "Me too," she whispered. Kixman watched her return to her cabin, curl up on the bunk and cry into her pillow. The alien observed the elevated cortisol, the irregular breathing, the physiological markers of suffering. By all Velthran logic, this was dysfunction. This was the behavior their species had evolved beyond. So why did it feel so profoundly important? On day 15, Captain Volkov invited Nora to the bridge. "Thought you might like to see this," he said, pointing to the view screen. Earth had appeared, still distant but visible. A blue jewel growing slowly larger. 6 more days. Nora breathed. Kixvan stood beside her, and for the first time since leaving their homeworld, spoke a truth they'd never admitted. "I think I am beginning to understand." "Understand what?" "Why you travel slowly. Why you tend plants. Why you honor his fear even when logic says you should not." The alien's form shimmered with something that might have been emotion. "You are not trying to reach a destination. You are trying to prove that love exists in the space between moments. That devotion is not the end result. But the journey itself." Nora looked at the alien, really looked, and saw something she'd never seen in a Veltran before. Uncertainty, wonder, the first cracks in their perfect efficiency. "Yes," she said simply. "You're learning." But Kixvan was learning more than they'd bargained for. As Earth grew closer and they observed Nora's anticipation mixed with dread, the alien realized they didn't want this journey to end. Not because the research was incomplete, but because saying goodbye to Nora had become unacceptable. The alien had spent 15 days observing human love. They hadn't realized they were learning to feel it themselves. The Meridian runner touched down at the Singapore spaceport on a morning wrapped in monsoon rain. Nora stood at the airlock, her single bag clutched in trembling hands, and for the first time in 21 days, hesitated. "He's waiting," Captain Volkov said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Go to him." Through the viewport, she could see James leaning against a railing, looking smaller than she remembered, wearing the blue jacket she'd given him for his birthday 3 years ago. Even from this distance, even through rain-streaked glass, she could see him searching for her. Kixvan materialized beside her, invisible to everyone except Nora. "Your cardiac rhythm has become irregular." "Fear?" "Terror," Nora admitted. "What if I wasted time? What if I should have teleported, should have been here weeks ago?" "Then why did you choose this path?" "Because he asked me to. Because some things matter more than logic, even when logic might provide more time together." Nora finally looked at the alien, and Kixvan was startled to see not doubt in her eyes, but absolute certainty. "Especially then. If I'd teleported, I would have gained 3 weeks with him. But I would have spent those weeks knowing I'd ignored the one thing he asked of me." "That's not love, Kixvan. That's selfishness wearing love's mask." The airlock opened. Nora ran through the rain, and James pushed off from the railing to meet her. They collided in the middle of the landing pad, holding each other as water poured down around them. No words, just 2 bodies confirming what hearts already knew. That distance had ended, that the journey was complete, that whatever time remained would be spent together. Kixvan watched from the ship's shadow and felt something inside their quantum structure fracture. Not break, but open, like a seed splitting to allow something new to grow. Over the following weeks, Kixvan observed with permission now, visible and acknowledged. James found the alien's presence oddly comforting. "Nice to know someone else thinks Nora's interesting enough to study," he joked, though his hands shook more each day. They planted the garden together. Nora did most of the physical work while James directed from a chair, his voice growing softer but no less animated. "Tomatoes, basil, sunflowers. Won't see them bloom," he told Kixvan during one of their conversations. "But she will. That's the point. You are creating something you will never experience," Kixvan observed. "I'm creating something we're experiencing right now. The future blooms are just a bonus." James smiled, that same warm expression Nora had shown in countless hologram messages. "You really don't get it, do you? Love isn't about the destination. It's about being present in every moment, even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones." Kixvan had been filing reports to the Velthran High Council throughout this period. Clinical observations about human pair bonding, resource allocation in terminal care situations, the inefficiency of emotional attachment. But the latest report sat unfinished in their quantum memory. How could they explain what they were witnessing? How could they reduce this to data? On a quiet evening, Nora and James sat in their garden under string lights, surrounded by plants that had grown impossibly fast, as if nature itself was hurrying to give them beauty. Kicksman hovered nearby, no longer just observing but somehow part of the scene. "Tell me about your species," James said suddenly. "Do you have anything like this? Anyone waiting for you somewhere?" "We eliminated such attachments 3,000 cycles ago," Kicksman replied. "We determined that emotional bonds reduced efficiency, created irrationality, caused suffering." "And are you happy?" James asked. The question hung in the air like those string lights, illuminating something Kicksman had never considered. Happy. The Velthran had no word for it. They had contentment, satisfaction, optimal function. But happiness? That implied something beyond mere existence. "I do not know," Kicksman admitted. "But I know that I feel something now that I never felt in 300 years of existence. When I observe you together, when I watch Nora care for you, when I hear you laugh despite deteriorating, I experience a sensation that is neither logical nor comfortable. Yet I do not wish it to stop." Nora reached out, and though her hand passed through Kicksman's energy form, the gesture's meaning was clear. "You're feeling connection. Welcome to being human, even if you're not." James's condition worsened rapidly in the 7th week. The neural degradation accelerated, stealing his mobility, then his speech. But his eyes remained clear, tracking Nora's movements with desperate attention, trying to memorize her face for whatever came next. Kicksman stayed through it all, invisible to the hospice staff but present, learning what it meant to witness someone you cared for fade. Because that's what had happened. Though the alien had no framework to understand it, they had come to care for both James and Nora, these strange humans who chose suffering over efficiency, who found meaning in temporary things. On the final night, James managed to whisper, "Tell her, worth it, every second. She knows." Kicksman replied, though they weren't sure he could hear, "She has always known." When James died just before dawn, Nora's grief was a sound Kicksman would carry forever in their quantum memory. Not data, not observation, but genuine pain shared by proximity to love. The alien remained as she held his cooling hand as the sun rose over their garden, as the tomatoes they'd planted together swayed in the morning breeze. 3 days later, Kicksman submitted their final report to the Velthran High Council. It was not what the council expected. "I was assigned to study human dysfunction," the report began. "I was to analyze why they reject efficiency, why they choose difficulty, why they sacrifice logic for emotion. I have concluded my research with the following finding. We have made a catastrophic error." The council chamber fell silent as Kicksman's testimony continued, broadcast across their homeworld. "Humanity possesses a weapon we cannot defend against, not because it is technologically superior, but because we have systematically removed our ability to understand it. They call it love. We call it dysfunction, but I have witnessed its power firsthand. It makes them travel slowly when they could move instantly. It makes them care for those who are dying. It makes them plant gardens they will never see bloom. And in doing so, it gives them something we lost millennia ago, purpose beyond mere existence." Dr. Nora Winters sacrificed career, time, and logic to honor her partner's final request. By your measurements, she lost everything. By human measurements, she gained everything. The knowledge that she loved completely, without reservation, until the very end. "Tell me, Council, when was the last time any of us felt we had gained everything?" Kicksman paused, their form flickering with an emotion the Velthran hadn't named in 3,000 years. "I am formally requesting reassignment, not to observe humanity, but to learn from them. Because the truth we have been avoiding is simple. We are the ones who are broken. We are the ones who need study. And if there is any hope for our species to remember what it means to truly live rather than merely exist, it will come from understanding this terrifying, beautiful thing called love." The transmission ended. The council would debate for months, but Kicksman had already made their choice. They returned to Earth, to the small garden where Nora sat among blooming tomatoes, reading to empty air the letters she'd written to James during that long journey home. She looked up as Kicksman materialized, unsurprised. "You came back," she said. "I had nowhere else to go. My people have forgotten how to feel. But you taught me that feeling is not weakness. It is the only thing that makes existence worthwhile." Nora smiled through tears. "Then stay. Help me tend this garden. Tell me about the stars." And I'll tell you about love, the real kind. The kind that doesn't end just because someone's gone. And so the alien who came to study human dysfunction learned the greatest lesson of all, that love is not something to be observed and catalogued, but something to be experienced and honored. That humanity's true power lies not in their weapons or their technology, but in their willingness to be vulnerable, to sacrifice, to choose connection over convenience. In a galaxy that had forgotten how to feel, one alien remembered. And in remembering, proved that evolution sometimes means going backward to find what you lost along the way. The tomatoes grew. The garden thrived. And somewhere in the spaces between stars, the Velthrin began to wonder if efficiency had cost them more than they'd ever calculated.